All right. Well, hello, everyone, again. Back for another week for our AIM study of the Mama Bear Apologetics book. This week, we're looking kind of at two chapters, but we're really probably just focus more on one. Chapters 11 and 12 look at the idea of pluralism and then the idea of spiritualism. But I really want to focus this time on that first, chapter 11, the idea of religious pluralism, what that means for us, how we work through it, how we talk our kids through it, all those kind of things. So let's go ahead and dive in. And again, as I've said every time, feel free to reach out with any questions or whatever, but hopefully this can help make a little more sense of the chapter and ways that we can talk about it and think through it. So let's start with the idea of pluralism in general. And as your book this week did a good job talking through, the idea of pluralism isn't anything bad or wrong or anything that we as Christians should be scared of. Pluralism is the acknowledgement that we live in a diverse world, racially, ethnically, and religiously. There are different religions. There are different views and beliefs people hold about who God is, who God isn't, how to approach him, all those kind of things. Being pluralistic is simply acknowledging that reality, and at its core, doing so for a good reason. Doing so because there's a belief that we shouldn't be killing each other. So at the heart of pluralism is really just the idea that, you know, a word gets tossed around a lot, which sometimes has good and bad connotations depending on your perspective, to coexist, to say, look, we can disagree and have different opinions and still live in a peaceful, harmonious society that isn't raged by war and violence and constant fighting. And as a Christian, I think there's a lot to that. And so pluralism in itself is just that acknowledgement. Now, it's also good as an American to acknowledge that there was a pretty substantial amount of time where America wasn't really an overly pluralistic society. We were a predominantly, as far as religion, a predominantly Christian society. And other parts of the world are similar. You wouldn't go to maybe parts of the Mideast like Iraq and say this is a pluralistic society. It's not. It's pretty much, but America has definitely changed and morphed into what is today a very pluralistic society. So that is what it is. However, there's something under the surface, and as every week as we've talked, we've kind of wrestled this idea of there's a reality that always seems to get pushed too far. And the part that's getting pushed too far in this case is the idea that pluralism, the acknowledgement that there are different ideas and different beliefs is one thing. Religious pluralism is a term, though, that's often applied to something that becomes a bit more about truth, and which is a big concept we've been hitting on the last few weeks. Religious pluralism is sort of this perspective, philosophy, worldview, whatever you want to call it, that kind of wants to say, okay, we live in this society where everyone has different opinions, different views about religion, about God. They're kind of all the same, and they really just kind of point to the same thing. We can't really know for sure who's right, who's wrong. And at the end of the day, as we've already seen, the most important value in our society is tolerance and inclusion. So religious pluralism kind of wants to say, how about we stop fighting and bickering and just acknowledge they're all kind of the same. They all point to the same thing. It doesn't matter which religion you're in. You're all, as long as you're sincere and you're worshiping something, aren't we all sort of getting at the same place? Can we all just hold hands, sing kumbaya, and get along? Notice this is different. Fundamentally, this is not the same thing as saying, for example, if I just say, I acknowledge there are different belief systems, that's different than saying, all the belief systems are essentially the same, right? Those are different things. So pluralism is the acknowledgement that there are differences. This thing we want to call religious pluralism is wanting to say they're really all kind of the same. They all just lead to the same thing and whatever. All religions are therefore valid. Let's just get along and get it fine. Now, as you can imagine, and if you've been following us, you've been enjoying the conversation, you've been reading the book, religious pluralism is an overflow of what we've already been discussing regarding postmodernism, the relativity of truth. What's true for you is true for me, whatever, live your truth. Don't tell people they're wrong. Religious pluralism is right at home there. It's sort of the taking all the postmodern ideas and applying it to all the religious differences in our world. No one really knows what's true, so just live your truth and therefore live your religion, let other people live religions, and so be it. Tolerate each other, which again is fine and good in some ways. We should live with tolerance for each other. But here's the problem. there's a difference, and we have to acknowledge there's a difference between saying, I acknowledge that we have different opinions and I choose to coexist with you in a harmonious and peaceful way, versus saying, all the differences are just kind of no big deal and maybe they aren't really different in the end. That's actually not a comment about people, how they live together. That's actually a theological claim. Saying that is making a statement about religion and the truth of it. So at the core, here's the deal. The message of religious pluralism is that the most important thing is that we live at peace, that you love your neighbor. Jesus taught that, love your neighbor. And therefore, let's just accept all religions as equally true and get along. Let's not fight about it. Who knows anyway? Because in the end, it doesn't matter what you believe as long as you're sincere, you're following your heart, all these kind of things, and that you're nice to people, which again, the most important thing. This is the heart of religious pluralism. And there's a common metaphor or story that's often told with religious pluralism I want to share with you. And you may have heard it. It goes back a ways and it gets brought up again and again. And it's this idea. It's like someone once say, here's what religions are like. There was an ancient Indian ruler who brought in 10 different people and blindfolded all of them. People from around the world who had never been to India. And because they had never been to India, they had never seen or experienced an elephant. So the king brought an elephant into his courtroom and had these 10 foreigners blindfolded and brought them in. And each of them had sort of their own access. One was in the back, one was in the leg, and he asked all 10 of them, what is an elephant? And of course, each of these people, because they had their own specific blindfolded perspective, was like, well, one had the leg and like an elephant is a big trunk tree type thing, right? Another had the tail, like an elephant's almost like a whip. Someone else held the ear, and it's like an elephant is like a big branch of a tree or something. Someone else held the trunk, it was like an elephant is a great snake of some kind. And the point that this analogy was trying to make is, just like religion, we're all blindfolded. We're all getting our own perspectives. We all get our, and none of us are completely right. And in some ways, we're all kind of right from our own perspectives. So let's stop fighting. Let's just acknowledge that we all, you might think of God as the trunk. You might think of God as the ear. None of us really know. We're all sort of right and we're all sort of wrong. So let's just acknowledge that, get along, and love each other. This is like the great picture of religious pluralism that's presented to us in different ways. And it fits right into postmodernism. Because remember, we talked again, postmodernism, this belief system, this worldview that says you can't really know truth. We're all sort of blindfolded. We all just have our own little perspectives. None of us know for sure. Same with religion. So every religion is just sort of grasping at God their own little way. We're all pointing to the same God. So let's just acknowledge we don't know. None of us and go on our way and love each other and coexist, right? You're probably like, yeah, I hear that a lot. Okay. So as we do throughout this book study, let's start with the good. Well, the good is the same good that I've shared many times as I've done this with you guys. The good is there is something true and inherently positive and good about loving each other, about peace. It is true that even Jesus, who we believe is God, the Christians believe is God, told us to live at peace, to love our neighbor, to be kind to others, to avoid wars. Like Jesus was a pacifist. So anytime you're talking about a way of thinking or communicating that is encouraging peace, that is encouraging loving others, that is encouraging us to consider others and avoid violence or things that bring about chaos, there's something good there. We are called to live at peace. Furthermore, there's nothing as a Christian in the story of Jesus and his teachings that would make me think that following him should ever be anything other than a choice that somebody makes. It should never be forced. So what we saw throughout the Middle Ages and the Crusades and things like that, both from Christians as well as Muslims, and many different religions have done this actually, forcing people into a religion or belief system is a problem. And as a Christian, I would say it's definitely a problem. So the recognition of plurality, of pluralism, of living in a society where people can disagree, people can have their own opinions. We don't have to kill each other. We don't have to fight. We don't have to yell at each other until we're red in the face because someone disagrees with us. There's good in that. And there's also good in acknowledging that, you know what, we don't always know everything. Maybe sometimes we are a little blindfolded and we're unsure. And we need to sort of live with a bit of grace with each other and choose peace at times. So there's good there, okay? All right, let's talk about the bad. Similarly, you can go back and watch previous videos and hear some of the same things I'm about to say, because it's all connected. As we've already talked about, being sincere in your belief or feeling it in your heart doesn't make it true. So right off the bat, this idea of like, well, as long as you're sincere, as long as you believe it and you're good with it, we've seen that there's a problem with that. Something is either true or it isn't. And now here, we've talked before when we first talked about postmodernism, how this can almost be like a self-refuting issue. Like if you say, well, no one can really know if something is true. Is that true? Well, think about this. If you want to say, well, all religions are true, right? Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, the three of the largest religions in the world, Christianity is the largest, all believe that other religions are wrong and teach that. Buddhism, which is another large religion, kind of does as well, not to the same extent, but all the world's largest religions actually teach that other religions are wrong. So if you're telling me that all religions are right and my religion preaches that other religions are wrong, yeah, we've got a problem. It doesn't matter how sincerely a Buddhist and Christian might be. They can't both be right. And they actually believe that they're not each other right. They have contradictory beliefs. So even just saying this, you say, like, well, aren't they all kind of just the same beliefs? Think about how different, and this isn't a world religions class, but a person who ascribes to Buddhism doesn't believe in a personal God who speaks to people and has a will. They believe everything is sort of, like more one with nature and things. And Brahman is sort of more of a, I don't want to get into it, but like the core difference of saying that God is personable is a truth claim that other religions disagree with. And then you get to Muslims and Christians and Jews, and we have some of the same roots, but the claim that Jesus was fully God, a Muslim says, no, he's not. I do not believe that's true. So we have contradictory claims, and you have to acknowledge that. Again, it doesn't mean we should be killing each other. It's okay to acknowledge that we disagree, but it's silly and actually kind of demeaning to pretend like the differences aren't real or don't matter. It's usually people who aren't actually committed to any of these belief systems, these religions, that want to say things like that. But people who are committed to them find that kind of offensive. It might sound nice, but a Muslim doesn't want you to say that their religion is just as true as other people. No, they don't believe that. Neither does a Jew, or neither does a Christian, neither does a Buddhist or a Hindu. It's just people who don't really want to get involved in it that make this claim that's actually kind of offensive. And get this, it's kind of intolerant. It's an intolerant view because you're making a religious claim about Christianity. You're telling Christians that their claim that Jesus is the only way isn't really true. So you're not actually being tolerant of my religion. The whole thing just falls apart. It's a mess. And let me go back to the elephant analogy. The king brings in an elephant, blindfolds the 10 people. Whenever people use that analogy, maybe you've heard it, whenever I hear someone use that analogy to defend their pluralistic viewpoints, it just makes me want to okay, first of all, there's two major flaws with that argument. The first is this. There is a person in that story who does know the truth, and that person is the king who brought the elephant in. And oftentimes the tolerant, loving pluralist already kind of thinks in their head they know what's true, and they just want you to see yourself as blindfolded. They usually just don't believe anything. Usually a pluralist probably doesn't believe any of it's true. They know the bigger picture. But even deeper than that, there's another huge problem with that analogy. It's a terrible analogy to be applied to pluralism, actually, and I'm surprised people do it. In that story, and in reality, an elephant is a real thing. And an elephant actually has real, true properties about itself. Just because some of the people were blindfolded and couldn't tell those real properties doesn't negate the truth of it. And at any point, if any of those people took off the blindfold and saw the elephant, they would realize that an elephant is not just a thick tree trunk or a big snake or a tail. An elephant is an actual living mammal with real properties. So saying that, yeah, maybe we don't see clearly, Okay, I'm a postmodern, I see some of that. But using that to say, therefore, there is no truth is silly. There is an elephant. And now just follow me on this, okay? Let's just use the word if God is real, then whoever God is, that is true, right? If God is a real being, then he has real traits. There are things that are true of God. Is he love or is he not love? Is he powerful or is he not powerful? Excuse me. If he's real, then he has real traits there are things that are true about him. On the other hand, if God is not real, then all religions are untrue. So if all religions are somehow true because there's a God, then all religions aren't true because they all describe him differently. And he must be described truly somehow. But if there is no God, then no religions are true, and saying they're all true is also a lie. All of religious pluralism falls apart when you really look at it that way. By any measure, acknowledging that there's difficulty in knowing the truth, sure. But throwing your hands up and saying they're all right is just lazy at best and idiotic at worst. It doesn't work. And finally, we'll kind of land here. Saying that, it doesn't really matter if you're right or wrong anyway. Who cares if you're right or wrong? As long as you worship something. Because after all, isn't that all that God wants? Is he just wants your sincere worship towards something? No. A Christian does not believe that. Jews don't believe that. Jews believed, and Christianity comes out of Judaism, so does Islam, that God is a jealous God who categorically does not want you worshiping other gods, who said, no, do not. And we talked about Jesus. Jesus was love. He just told us to love each other. Listen, as a Christian, and get your hands around this. Yes, Jesus said that in talking about the greatest commandment, we are to love each other as we love ourselves. Yeah. That was the second greatest commandment. The first greatest commandment was to love God. Which God? Yahweh, the one true God, not Brahmin or yourself or spiritualism or other stuff. Jesus was very clear that the most important thing was that you committed your life to the one true God revealed through Moses in the Old Testament and now in Jesus. The second commandment following it was to love others. So, yeah, Jesus called us to live at peace and love others, but to do so from a faithful commitment to him as Lord. That's the gospel, that Jesus is king and he has come to reclaim the earth as his throne. He has come to call people back to faithfulness to him, to live as we were created for. You cannot be a Christian and be a pluralist. It doesn't work. The whole thing falls apart. Jesus wants your loyalty, your allegiance, not just a general vague belief in something and worshiping whatever. No, he wants you worshiping him. So let's end our last few minutes together by a healthier approach. That's the message. That's the good and the bad. Here's a healthy approach. I think we need to move past a belief-centered religion and continue to move towards a faith-centered one. And what I mean by that, and something we talked about before, belief-centered religions are all about, I hold these ideas to be true. This is what God is like. This is what God is. And when everything is belief-centric, we can argue, well, can you see clearly? Are you blindfolded? Are you seeing the full thing? And well, if it's just belief, I believe this, you believe that, it's okay. Belief-centered religions fall into all this moray of who's right, who's wrong, let's just get along, let's be fine, whatever. Faith-centered religions, being faith-centered, is, there are things that I need to believe are true. But the core thing that I need to believe is true is that Jesus is a person who's revealed God to me and calling for a relationship with me. It's not just about the beliefs, it's about a relationship. And to be in a relationship with another person cannot be pluralistic. There's no pluralistic, if Jesus is who he said he was and he's calling for my fidelity, my loyalty, giving it to him is exactly what he's asking for. Not giving it to Muhammad, not giving it to the, spirits in the air or through meditation to find nirvana. That is not what a faithful commitment to Jesus looks like. And faithful commitment to Jesus is what he's asking for. And we need to help our kids and ourselves continue to keep that in front. We're not just arguing about truth claims. We're arguing about a relationship with God through his self-revelation in Jesus. And that's not negotiable. It's not like, well, maybe this way. No. Why is there only one way to God? Because God revealed himself to us through Jesus and said, this is the way to come to me. There you go. No other religions are true if that is true. Can I coexist with other people who disagree with me? Absolutely. I don't have to be killing and fighting and warring with each other. I can coexist with someone who disagrees with me on that. But does that mean that I can acknowledge that their way is also true, that I have to be like, well, they're probably right too? No, I don't believe that. I believe Jesus is the only way. And I want to stand on that and not let anything else filter into my thinking in that way. So that's the challenge. That's a big part of following Jesus, is making that commitment, acknowledging that he is the truth. And it's what he's called us to do. So we need to be people and parents who continue to enforce that in our children and reinforce that it's not just about beliefs, it's about a relationship with God through Jesus. And there's no wiggle room for plurality in that when you're talking about a relationship. We're not bringing anyone else into this marriage. Okay. All right. Hope that was helpful. Great topic. Sorry I didn't get into chapter 12 a lot. You can read for yourself and talk about it. But if you have any questions, again, feel free to email me. Let me know. I'm here for you guys, and look forward to talking to you guys next week as we continue our study. Thanks.